I see.
Freedom the people of
Hell yeah.
freedom the people of need. Yeah, yeah. Freedom the people of want. Freedom the people of need. Yeah, yeah. Freedom the people of want. Freedom the people of need. Yeah, yeah. Freedom the people of want. Freedom the people of need. Yeah,
Yeah. Real man a road. Now bow wolf in a tree grand a road. Now bow down to no demon a road. UIC when you see man a road, me say yeah. Real man a road. Now bow wolf in a tree grand a road. Now bow down to no demon a road. UIC when you see man a road. Ready for broke every chain. That when you free up the people, levitate. Jamaica member, you ever great. I feel burn up the fire upon every snake. Me give thanks in every way. God still a look down once see we safe. I see run the road long time. GLP and PMP I sell we out. Still I do the test even though we know the end result. If them coulda kill with them catch we and hang we know. No force no coercion, me freedom in a step. No one fi rob we and kill we and feel them I go make it out. You know see the leeches, you know see the hands of the devil when him sleep with. You know see the leeches, you know see the hands of the devil when him sleep with. Yeah, yeah. Real man a road. Now bow wolf in a tree grand a road. Now bow down to no demon a road. UIC when you see man a road, me say yeah. Real man a road. Now bow wolf in a.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of UIC Liberty TV. I am Chase Neal, General Secretary and Shadow Minister of Education and Human Development. All right, welcome to everyone here. I see JMH here. Welcome, JMH. Uh, Sylvester Lawrence. How do I pronounce this? North Gill. Relim. Welcome, Supreme TV, Paula Shelley. All right, great to have you guys here. All right, so we are going right into it. Cardell, welcome. We are going right into it. And Lion, welcome to. Good evening. All right, so our topic rescuing our schools, rescuing Jamaica. Now, we know that our education system has failed us. Our teachers are undervalued, underpaid, and they are leaving us by droves. Our students leave school unqualified. They're unqualified to work and unprepared to participate meaningfully in society. Our people, unfortunately, have not learned how to think effectively because our school system has failed to teach our people how to think. We we rather rely on teaching people what to think. And as a result, our creativity has stagnated and our production as a nation has suffered. Tonight, I aim to show you how the UIC will enhance the quality of education, get rid of the farce of free education. And also, some persons have been fighting me on this, but will prove to you how free education is not the best education, regardless of how other countries have been performing in that area. And yet, we will make education affordable and accessible to all, although we will get rid of the notion of free education. So now we're going to make education truly public, yet affordable and accessible. Now, as we said, we're looking at rescuing schools, rescuing Jamaica. Now, this is a bold statement to make, but it is exactly what we intend to do. And when I say we, I don't just mean the UIC, I mean all of us who are automatically uniters who have decided to support the cause. So, all of us working together will rescue our schools and rescue Jamaica. Now, while we will cover exactly how we intend to rescue the education system and ultimately rescue Jamaica, this live broadcast continues our line of argument that was started in two previous broadcasts. The first one is Why Are They Leaving? That was done by Mr. Patterson on Monday, August 22. And the other, Why Them Eat Africa So? Real Education Now, done by myself on Friday, August 26. So this live broadcast, although it's able to stand on its own, is a continuation of Why Are They Leaving and Why Them Eat Africa So? Real Education Now. So for a comprehensive picture of why teachers are leaving and how much trouble we are in as a nation as it relates to our education system, and why we need to implement the UIC's Learning Enrichment Advanced Program now, that's LEAP, I would, if you have never done it before, I would recommend you to watch Why Are They Leaving and Why Them Eat Africa So? Real Education Now, after you have seen this live. Now, and please, as we always say, please like, share, subscribe, like it from now. And as soon as possible, if you can share these broadcasts with a teacher. Anyways, we are going into the meat of the matter, rescuing our schools. But it makes sense though, before we look at the problem, before we address the problem rather, and before we can seek to rescue our schools, we need to understand the problem. And before we can understand the problem, we need to examine the problem. All right, so now I'm going to be sharing with you a video. Before you go to school, watch this. What is school for? All right, stay tuned.
What is school for? Feel free to call me slow, but I spent 16 years going to school, and I still don't know. When I finished, I didn't know how to do my own taxes, purchase a home, or apply for a loan. I didn't know a thing about investments, building credit, or getting a job. I graduated at the top of my class, and what did I have? This fancy diploma to sit at home with my mom. But luckily, they did teach me some important skills like factoring trinomials and how mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. I'm so happy I remember the Pythagorean theorem, because it helped me a lot. Okay, I'm lying. Let me stop. Because all the stuff they taught me, truthfully, I forgot. Mom, remember when you would ask me, what did you learn in school today? And I would say, nothing much. I wasn't being modest. The truth about it, Mom, is I had already forgotten. And it's not just me, millions of students sing the same song. How many of you guys avoid eye contact with the teacher to try not to get caught upon? Afraid to raise your hand for fear of being wrong, which proves that school isn't an environment earning or building up the intellect. It's just a game you play for grades and how many A's you can collect. But I guess what do you expect when the most commonly asked question in class is this gonna be on the test? Is this gonna be on the test? See, if school put learning instead of testing and memorizing as the top standard, then the letter F would not stand for failure. It would stand for find another answer. And if school was really interested in our personal and academic success, students would wake up later, have more freedom and homework, a lot less. And that's not my opinion. This conclusion has been scientifically tested and proven. And a teacher that doesn't believe me, feel free to check my works cited page to inspect. Oh, and I did it in MLA format because I know that's all you will accept. See, students would get more benefit from an extra hour of sleep than putting them through the torture of an extra essay, reading 150 pages, doing problems 1 through 60 on the worksheet, and having 3 projects due by the end of the week. Not only is it pointless pain, but it's also dim-witted. Because we get so much work, but they don't teach the time management skills to deal with it. See, in school, we are controlled by bells. We have to learn in rooms with the feng shui of a prison cell. We have to ask permission to relieve bodily functions, but not before the teacher asks a million questions like, why didn't you go before class? I'm sorry, my bladder is kind of on its own schedule and it's not always timely. See, teachers always say, use your time wisely. But that never made sense to me. Because these 6 cruel hours of our lives we call school might literally be the worst use of time management ever in history. Think about it. The traditional teaching method is foolish. No, it's useless, multiplied by the square root of stupid. What they do is they cram information in your head, force feeding you, and then you throw it up on the test. That's not education. That's bulimia. And the more bulimic you are, the better you will do on their assessments. So it's no wonder why so many students graduate mentally and emotionally anorexic. See, school teaches you how to memorize dots. True education should teach you how to connect them. True education teaches you how to catch a fish. School teaches you, yeah, you caught the fish, but you didn't show your work, so it doesn't count. Throw it back. I'm just asking, what is school for? It's not education. That's just not true. If you still think that, you might be sniffing glue. See, the word education comes from the Latin root educe, meaning bring out, i.e. bring the gifts out of a person and make them viable. But school doesn't bring out much. It just stuffs more facts inside of you. Now, some of that stuff is justifiable. We need reading, writing, and some arithmetic. That's fair. But are you telling me metamorphic and igneous rocks are more important than self-care? If suicide is the third leading cause of death of ages 10 to 24, and Harvard studies suggest the biggest predictor for success is self-control and emotional health, then why the heck aren't we taught how to handle stress, bullies, or rejection? How about anxiety or depression? You know, skills we need for our entire lives. Bro, I don't even know how to cook. I'm honestly surprised I'm still alive. But hey, at least I can name all the battles that happened in the Civil War. Seriously, what is school for? Some say you need it to be successful, and that's something we do not doubt. But do you own a MacBook or iPhone? Did you know they both were created by a dropout? Are you watching this video on Facebook or YouTube? Doesn't matter which you choose, they both were created by dropouts. Ever use Snapchat, WhatsApp, shopped at Whole Foods? Well, thank a dropout. Does your home furniture come from IKEA? Okay, don't get the wrong idea. He was not a dropout. Don't be a fool. I mean, how could he drop out? Ingvar Kamprad, founder of IKEA, never even went to school. I know what you're thinking. He's just picking and choosing. There's millions who didn't go to school that aren't successful. Who is he fooling? And you're right. But open your history books and start perusing. You'll find the very people we idolize in school never really had formal and/or secondary schooling. I'm talking George Washington, Abe Lincoln. America's best presidents had zero school between them. Ben Franklin, Thomas Edison, shall I proceed? Ernest Hemingway, Mark Twain, Teddy Roosevelt, Margaret Mead. Now please, I'm not saying drop out, because some schools are great and many teachers are rare treasures. I'm saying that there's a difference between people who are smart and people who score better. I'm saying that your future is something that no test will ever measure. Even if that test begins in 3 letters like SAT, ACT, it's BS if they say those determine your LIFE. No, your destiny is in your hands. You shape it to be great. So don't expect school to open doors, because it's more likely to slam them in your face. Sometimes I wonder about all the dreams lost in school and how much potential goes waste. If it wasn't for music and YouTube, then I would have been just another lost case. Everybody watching this, please, close your eyes. Imagine a child sitting in the back of some teacher's class in some town. He never raises his hand, he fails most of his classes, but inside of him, there is a passion. And if nurtured and brought out, will lead him to discover the cure for cancer. But you see, I'm afraid that that child's gift will never come out. He will never win the Nobel Prize award because in class he was ignored and his worth was judged only by his scores. So teachers, principals, parents, advisors, and students, I ask one more time, what is school for? Hey guys, what's up? My name is Prince EA, and I want to thank you for watching that video.
I'd like to echo the question. What is school for? Before we proceed, I'd like to welcome some persons who have joined after. Liddy, welcome to you. PPJJ, Bruce Davis. I'd like to also look at read some of the comments in the chat. All right, Mr. Patterson is saying a truly public education system will empower parents, teachers, and students. So called free education has proven to be a trick and a trap that is more expensive than you might have realized. And we're going to be looking at that today. All right. There is also Bruce Davis is saying that I'm asking all uniters please support the march on September 22. They're just public service announcement to support our leader on the court day for our diaspora, like myself, with contribute by donating. All right, so to widen the scope of that announcement, on the 9th of this month, that's next Friday, we will have the case the people versus the state. Of course, we know the people will be represented by Mr. Patterson, who was unjustly arrested last year when he led a group of persons to protest the government abusing our rights to move in our own country and our rights to our freedom and our right to choose what we put in our bodies and make medical decisions for ourselves. So he'll be going to trial next week, Friday, that's the 9th. And all uniters will be in the area, not on, well, all uniters who will be able to will be in the area giving support and also spreading the word of the UIC in Mandeville. On September 22 is the commemoration walk for good governance. We'll be walking from downtown Kingston to Halfway Tree, and we will be walking in demand for good governance. And we know that governance, the because of governance, everything else is affected. And the offshoots of poor governance are what we see around us: crime out of control, lack of opportunities, which is part of the reason that we're here today looking at education system that we need to rescue. So yes, so ask all persons who can turn. And the 22nd of this month in Kingston, please do so. If you can't, donate to the so that together we can really rescue Jamaica. All right, so back to the topic of what is school for. Jason Christie says school is to groom eager minds to think and ideas theoretically. That is true. Now we see where the young man in the video raised some really good points. Now he said that he gave an example of young people in age 10 to 24 being more likely to commit. Now, if we were truly educated, we would have addressed that problem. But school does not teach people to really solve problems or think out of the box. Pythagoras theorem, all of those advanced means of calculating math, we don't need them in everyday life, but they're taught to us. So school fills us with a lot of useless information. Now, we just listen to how someone questions, with good reason, what is school for? But now we'll be zeroing on six specific reasons or six specific problems in the education system. So now listen to this video, 6 problems with our school system, and we link back after.
There is a growing feeling today that something is wrong with our system of education. But what is it? Well, we send our children to school to prepare them for the real world, which is changing very, very fast. But our schools haven't changed much for hundreds of years. In fact, thought leaders from around the world agree that the current system of education was designed in the industrial age mainly to churn out factory workers. And this industrial age mentality of mass production and mass control still runs deep in schools. Industrial age values. We educate children by batches and govern their lives by ringing bells. All day long, students do nothing but follow instructions. Sit down, take out your books, turn to page 40, solve problem number 3, stop talking. At school, you're rewarded for doing exactly what you are told. These are industrial age values that were really important for factory workers. Their success depended on following instructions and doing exactly what they were told. But in today's world, how far can you get by simply following instructions? The modern world values people who can be creative, who can communicate their ideas and collaborate with others. But our children don't get a chance to develop such skills in a system that's based on industrial age values. Lack of autonomy and control. At school, our children experience a complete lack of autonomy and control. Every minute of a child's life is tightly controlled by the system. But in today's world, if you're doing important work, then you're managing your own time. You're making your own decisions regarding what to do and when to do it. But life at school looks very different. The system is sending a dangerous message to our children that they are not in charge of their own lives. They just have to follow whatever is laid down instead of taking charge and making the most of their lives. Experts believe autonomy is incredibly important for children. It's no wonder then that our children are bored and demotivated by school. Can you imagine how you would feel if you were told exactly what to do for every minute of your life? Inauthentic learning. Most of the learning that happens in schools today is not authentic because it relies on memorization and rote learning. The system defines a generic set of knowledge that all children must know. And then, every few months, we measure how much has been retained by administering exams. We know that such learning is not authentic because most of it is gone the day after the exam. Learning can be much deeper and more authentic. It can be so much more than just memorization and retention. But that's the only thing we measure, and test scores are the only thing we value. This has created an extremely unhealthy culture for students, parents, and teachers. Children are going through endless hours of tuitions, staying up all night memorizing useless facts that they will forget very soon. No room for passions and interests. We have an extremely standardized system where each child must learn the same thing at the same time in the same way as everyone else. This doesn't respect the basic fact of being human, that each of us is unique and different in our own way. We all have different passions and interests. And the key to fulfillment in life is to find your passion. But do the schools of today help our children find and develop their passion? There seems to be no room in the current education system for the most important questions in a child's life. What am I good at? What do I want to do in life? How do I fit into this world? The system doesn't seem to care. There are so many greatly talented people who failed in the traditional school system. Fortunately, they were able to overcome these failures, but not everyone can. We have no measure for how much talent, how much potential goes unrecognized in the current system. Differences in how we learn. Each of us is also different in how we learn, in how much time we take to learn something, and what tools and resources work best for us. But the system has no room for such differences. So if you're a bit slow in learning something, you are considered a failure, when all you needed was a bit more time to catch up. Lecturing. In the current system, children are lectured for more than 5 hours a day. But there are a few big problems with lecturing. Sal Khan from Khan Academy calls lecturing a fundamentally dehumanizing experience. 30 kids with fingers on their lips, not allowed to interact with each other. Also, in any given classroom, different students are at different levels of understanding. Now, whatever the teacher does, there are bound to be students who are either bored because they are ahead or confused because they're behind. Because of the internet and digital media, our children have at their fingertips all the information in the world. Technology has made it possible for anyone to learn anything. But for fear of losing control, the system is not leveraging these incredible resources. Our system of education, which evolved in the industrial age, has become outdated and ineffective. If we want to prepare our children for the modern world, if we want learning to be effective and engaging, then there's no doubt that we need to fundamentally change our system of education.
No, we have seen 6 reasons why there's six problems in the education system, and these are very big problems. In fact, these reasons, these problems are some of the very reasons why I left teaching in the public system, because to me it was just a numbers game. We do not teach children to solve problems. We just fill their heads with information. And this is a problem that is not limited to Jamaica. In fact, this video is describing an American system, which is the same for the British system, the Canadian system, many systems over the world. Our children are not challenged. Their uniqueness doesn't come into play. Their the natural way of learning, that when you think of it, the last time you really learned a skill, was it sitting down and being still and being told what to do, or did you fully immerse yourself into understanding how a process or how a device worked? The way learning is done in schools, where the way that learning, and I use quotation mark, is done in schools is not productive at all, as you would have seen from the video here. No, for someone to learn and learn effectively, that person must be invested in the thing. If children have no autonomy, no control of their own selves, how can we expect them to learn? So this system, there's something totally wrong with it, not only in Jamaica, but all over the world where such a learning system exists. However, Jamaica has another problem. So the dice are stacked against us already now. We are based on the system that we're using. The odds are stacked against our students. We see that there is a reason why so many students leave school not knowing anything. The way it is taught, the way the subject matter is taught, is not taught in a way for children to learn. And that's the system, the education system. But in Jamaica, we have another complication. Now, before I go there, a question was asked, Supreme TV, if the UIC is going to create a better system, why can't the taxes pay for education all the way up to high school? All right, we'll answer that question during the course of the live. In fact, we may answer that question a bit now with the viewing of this next video that will describe Jamaica's other problems in addition to the disadvantages that exist. Jamaica's corruption in government affects education drastically. And a short answer to your question, Supreme TV, is, with the corruption in Jamaica, can we really trust our politicians to be in charge of education? But view this clip and we return after.
In 1969, when the high school building program commenced with the loan from the World Bank, a budget of 9.5 million US was agreed on to build 50 schools, expand 4 Teachers College and UTech, as well as expanding the Jamaica School of Agriculture, known today as CASE. The $9.5 million was also budgeted to construct staff housing in rural areas, hire specialist consultants and engineers. The project ran over by an additional $9.5 million, resulting in a total of $19 million being spent on the program. The Ministry of Education was an embarrassment at this point. It was a complete wastage of public funds and total disregard for public resources. The contracts for the school building program were awarded by word of mouth. Contractors were instructed to begin working without any contract signage nor written approval. It was a procurement nightmare for the ministry, and all this came full circle in the 1970s. The Jamaican economy was averaging double-digit growth in the first few years of the 1970s, but after this calamity, it had never seen such numbers since. The Ministry of Education dropped the ball. Their negligence towards this education program haunts Jamaica to this day. This was the kickstart Jamaica needed to become a first world nation. This was the catapult we needed to rival the likes of Singapore. But unfortunately, the burial pit was already being dug, and this was the final nail in Jamaica's coffin to prosperity. 50 years later, and the education system have yet to recover from the corruption and wastage that took place in the late 60s, early 70s. Jamaica took on additional debt as well as steep fiscal tightening to see the project through to completion. But they needed more schools. They needed way more schools. See, the school building program was the first phase of a comprehensive educational reform intended to propel Jamaica forward. But those ambitions had to be sidelined, as the prospective funds that was supposed to finance the other phases was all directed towards the first phase. So essentially, only half the schools that could have been built were built. Instead of 50 high schools, 100 could have been built, and 2 times the number of primary schools. In 1972, there was a change in government, which began a mass enrollment campaign across the island. With a growing population, a primary school enrollment rate of 90%, a high school enrollment rate of 57%, and not enough high schools to meet the needs of the students, the learning outcome plummeted. Students' performance was unimpressive, and classrooms were severely overcrowded. It was very common to have 50 to 60 students in a class. Side note, I had 63 students in my grade 6 class, and that was in 2005. This led to extremely low productivity for the coming decades, as Jamaica's economic prosperity stagnated after the school building program, which to this day has not recovered. Jamaica was now in a predicament. It had a growing debt to repay, with a low-skilled labor force relying mainly on farming, bauxite and tourism for foreign exchange. Jamaica's contemporaries at the time progressed smoothly into the 4th Industrial Revolution, while 50 years later, our economy has gotten weaker and weaker and more reliant on remittance for sustenance. Poor governance leading back to the writing of the Constitution, the partisan origin of our political system, and our deep-rooted culture of corruption, where only a few benefit at the expense of the poor, has kept Jamaica and most of the developing world in a deprived state. What we have today in Jamaica is a reality likened to that of the colonial system, where a few elite enjoy the spoils of the nation, while the masses live in deplorable conditions. Marcus Garvey's living conditions as a child was similar to many of ours growing up in Jamaica. While we may have had better access to schools and public healthcare facilities, the quality was still uninspiring. Running water and proper sewer systems remain a luxury for many. The middle class is slowly fading out, leaving just the rich and the poor, and the wealth imbalance is such that a majority of the population is working for a few elitists. Damien Jr. Gong said some very true but hurtful words. Sad to see the old slave mill grinding slow but grinding still. Alright, so I know the documentary was both daunting and demotivating. Make you feel like there's no way forward for little Jamaica. But I'm never one to focus on just the problem. The solution resides in the United Independence Congress, the UIC. They are Jamaica's third officially registered political party. I've read their manifesto, I've heard them speak, and honestly, they're the motivation behind this documentary. They have the solutions Jamaica need right now and need to thrive. I know you may say Manley did some great things, Siaga did some great things for Jamaica. For instance, Manley created the NHT, Siaga created the SLB. But think about it this way. If you're building a house and you're digging the foundation, and the foundation is dug poorly, it no matter how nice the door will look, how nice the windows are, French windows, it no matter how nice the roof is, the house still lean. Let's get our house straight. Let's get our home straight. I have more documentaries to come. The next one being Jamaica's banking cartel. You know what, Mr. One there. So until then, let's stay safe. One Jamaica, one nation, UIC. Wow, good.
All right. So we just heard, by the way, from Jason Christie. He's a PhD student and a member of UIC's education committee. Now, we have just laid out for you the problems with the education system. We are going to solve the problems, but let us just go again through some of the problems that were looked at. One, our students are taught material that they will never use in life. Our students are taught in a herd mentality factory type of setting that does not allow them to retain anything. So they study just for tests and they don't retain anything past the test. It's all a numbers game, as the first video said for us, made clear. Another problem with the education system is that our students' individuality is not recognized. Their talents, their interests, none of that is incorporated in how they learn. And we all know that if you're interested in something, it is all the more likely that you will be invested in it. But nowhere in our education system are our children's interests, our children's talents and skills incorporated into how they learn. And when I say we now, I'm talking about the general education system. So we see when our children pass out of school, not knowing how to solve problems, not learning how to think critically and deeply about something in order to arrive at a solution. Is it a wonder then that when they leave school and they go into jobs, they don't have enough common sense or sense of how to um, react to a certain situation? Lion Rule the Jungle Without Fear says the old slave mill is grinding still. Let's put a stop to this grinding mill by coming together and voting for the UIC and make Mr. Patterson our next PM and eventually President of Jamaica. So we see the problems in the education system, but added to that, added to this failing system, a system that cannot drive any productivity because our students don't know how to be productive. They are not taught how to manage time. They are not taught how to understand themselves. There is no emotion mastery, no understanding of emotion, no understanding of the self. So how do we expect them to solve conflicts between them and other people? They resort to the easiest thing, violence. A man violate you, then you react with violence. We don't know how to really think because school system did not teach us how to think. It was not designed this way. It was designed to pass out factory workers and workers for government agencies. We're taught to be obedient, to do what we're told, to do this task, then this task, then this task, on to the next. But apart from those inherent problems in the system, Jamaica has another one: government corruption. We see there in the video where less than half of the schools that were supposed to be built were built. And then there was a change of government, but there was not a change in how things went. Still wasting of money, which led to our classes becoming overcrowded. So the teachers have a tall order already. The students have enough odds stacked against them already by fault of how the system is organized. On top of that, though, our political system allows for the politicians to thief the money, to mismanage the education system, so that now we have overcrowding in our classes. Now, for those who may not know, the smaller the number of students is, the better can adequately address the needs of the students. Now, the fact that our schools are overcrowded is a fault not only of the education system, but of the political system that funds the education system. We see even now a mismanagement of the education system. Just a couple of years ago, Senator Rael Reid, who was then Minister of Education, made away with a lot of cash. He misappropriated it according to the news persons. We see where Grace McLean, who was permanent secretary, also misappropriated funds in the millions that was earmarked for education. Even now, with our teachers leaving, the government is mismanaging the situation, calling for teachers who are already out of the system past their prime, calling on student teachers who have not yet fully learned how to teach to fill the gap. Is this laziness, mental laziness, or is it by design? We can only speculate, but we have looked now at the problems in the system. Problems caused by bad governance, really, because if we had good governance, our education system, education which is so important to productivity, would have been better. Neswok made a comment earlier about sometimes lies being taught as facts, and that is the truth. Now, we have looked at the problems. Now, what are the solutions? Oh, what we have watched might have taken some of us out of our comfort zones, because if you watch those videos, report to you that school makes no sense, which is what I say. School as it is now makes no sense. So if school makes no sense, why do we go? That is not a comfortable notion to think about. But we are going to get even more uncomfortable because we're going to be looking at solutions that we may not be used to. So how can we fix the system? This system can only only be fixed by radical change. And and I'm going to introduce the education plan. Just so before we do so, we're going to look at another video, a case public education. Sound weird? All right, listen to case public education.
So, I mean, I've just wrapped up a book on education called The Case Against Education, where I argue for defunding education. Right? So, yes, so like, isn't that bad for you? Well, yeah, it would be bad for me if people listen, but still my conscience says this is the right thing to do.
Okay, so
Yes.
sell me on that. I went to a public elementary school,
Yes.
public junior high, public high school.
Yeah.
I went to State University of New York
Yes.
at Binghamton, which was hugely subsidized by the government. I think it was around $9,000 a year, and I got a great education. Why am I wrong on that?
So I went to public schools right in this neighborhood, actually. But so like the heart of my case is something called the signaling model of education. So this is a fancy term for a common sense idea. It just says that a lot of the reason why education pays is not that it's teaching useful job skills, but rather you're jumping through hoops to show off for employers. All right, so just think about all the classes that you ever had to take, and then how few of them are actually relevant to the job that you do. You actually probably have a job where you do use more of what you studied. Although,
I was a political science
yes,
major,
yes.
so there you go.
But think about all the classes that were required where you would not have been allowed to graduate without going through all of them. So I always have this example. Imagine you're like one Aristotle class short of college graduation, and yet you want to finish that class. Why? Because you're going to use the Nicomachean ethics and on the job? Probably not. Rather because you want that diploma, and employers are like many employers will just throw your application right in the trash unless you have the diploma.
But do you lose something doing it your way because of just a certain breadth of knowledge? Now, I'm not saying that every class should be
Yes.
mandated, and of course
Right.
they stick you in things
Yes.
that shouldn't be necessary. But just that in terms of college specifically, that's where you should get a broad sense of knowledge. Would that be at risk then?
Well, here's the thing. It's not at risk because almost no one gets it now. So that is the harsh truth, is that if you just go and look at what graduates of the current system know, it is next to nothing. Right? So there have been some great nationally representative surveys of what American adults know about government, about history, about economics, and the answer is they know next to nothing. So if you were to defend the system saying that people need breadth of knowledge, well, it's not a defense of the current system because the current system has not given it to them. The way that I like to think about it is that typical American college graduate is lucky to maybe answer half of the most basic questions you can imagine on civics.
Yeah.
Now you might say, well, that was still worthwhile. I say, it's not worthwhile because what do you call someone who knows half their letters? What do you call someone who knows half their letters?
An idiot?
Illiterate.
Yeah.
If you know half your letters, you are illiterate. You're not half literate if you know letters.
Yeah.
You are illiterate because you cannot read.
Yeah.
Similarly, say if you know half the basic facts about U.S. history or about American government, you don't know half of what you need to know. You just don't know it at all.
If you think there are
you don't have a clue.
If you think there are 1.5 branches of government,
Yes.
we're in a lot of trouble.
You just don't have a clue about what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's what the current system has given us. So when people say, wouldn't this be a disaster? I say, well, you might say the current system is a disaster, but what I'm proposing wouldn't be worse. Now, there's always the question, well, but why not go and redouble our efforts so that people really do learn the stuff? That people generally forget what they learn very quickly. So on test day, actually, I believe that most of the students in the civics class probably actually kind of knew their stuff. But what psychologists call fade out is so enormous. Just like in one year, out the next. If you don't keep testing it, you don't keep using it, you lose it. I mean, this is some of the most interesting research in psychology. So there's a lot of research on fade out in school, where you go and you teach the kids something, and then you go and measure it 1 or 2 years later in school. But the really scary fade out is from school to adulthood. Because the kids in school, at least they kind of know I'm going to have to learn this again, I might get tested on again. But once you finally graduate, that's it. That's the end.
Yeah.
So there's a fantastic study of retention of higher mathematics throughout life. And it's like algebra and geometry. Within a couple decades, most people took those classes are back to where they were before they even actually started the classes. The only people who remember their algebra and geometry are people who go all the way up to calculus. So if
Right.
you go all the way to
Everyone
calculus,
else.
then you go and retain algebra and geometry for the rest of your life. But you have to go way beyond a subject to actually retain to retain the basics. And again, and this all fits with like use it or lose it, or Tiger Mom Made Me Chew has a great slogan, like every day you don't practice is the day you get worse. So this does go with, well, so why bother teaching people things they're just going to forget anyway?
Yeah.
So this is part of my critique of what's wrong with throwing so much money at education. So now, of course, none of this denies that schools do teach some useful material. But again, my view is, all right, again, so for the useful material, like most people can pay for it, most people's parents can pay for it. And then if there's going to be any role for government, let it be for the small minority of kids whose parents are not able to take care of them, or charities not taking care of them. And then for just that last sliver of people, if there's going to be a role for government, let it be that. So don't throw money at a problem. If there's going to be money, let it be narrowly targeted to give, to be mindful that you are taking money from taxpayers without their consent, and at minimum, you owe them responsibility to spend the money well. I think that seems like a really basic thing.
I think we've given up that minimum a long time ago.
Yeah, but again, so it's one thing to say, look, this is so important that you have to pay whether you like it or not. Too bad. But then go and spend that money heedlessly. That seems like a true human rights abuse to take someone for money at gunpoint and then just blow it.
All right, the gentleman has preempted me because he has started to talk about some features of the UIC education plan, which we will be looking at shortly. So he makes the case for us not us, the Americans, to defund public education and to do away with the public education system, because most of what we learn in school, or they learn, same thing as we, same system, is not practical and apply to real life. And let me ask the question, really. He said, if you don't know half of your letters, you're not half literate, you're totally illiterate. Our school system is supposed to prepare us for life, to live in society. So let me ask a question, and you may reply in the comment section. Do you know how to work out your taxes? Is that something that is important living in society? If you don't know how to work out your taxes, whose fault is it? Another thing, do you know the appropriate response when a police officer stops you to search you? If that should happen to you, do you know how to respond? Is that a commonplace occurrence in society? We should know. But if we don't know, whose fault is it? School should prepare us for living. How many persons know how to apply for a job and how to position themselves in the best way to get a job? How many persons know how to start their own job? Is that not important? If I should ask you how laws are made, could you answer? Now, I don't have to ask the entire cohort of Jamaicans to know that the majority of them don't know the answer to these questions. But these are problems that we face in everyday life. Cool guy says exactly my point. I don't know how to work out my taxes, and I have a Bachelor of Science. We are not taught how to deal with the commonplace problems, the commonplace tasks that we need to deal with in life, because we were not taught. But where should we have been taught? In school. So a powerful case is being made that school does not teach us the valuable things. Sure, we learn to read, we learn to do math, which is important. But what about everything else? So we see really that school was really made for us to work in the factories during the Industrial Revolution or to work in a government job where we don't have to do much but do what we're told. Kamari Campbell says parents are supposed to prepare their children to live in society, and I agree. But how do parents who themselves don't know how to live in society prepare their children to live in society? Mr. Patterson says if we were truly educated, political corruption would be much less, as the leaders would not be able to fool us so easily or get away with it. Uh, 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 a very good point. Um, Let me just mention this briefly. If we know, for example, if we were truly educated and we know, for example, how laws are made, we would know that at least one person from the opposing party would have to agree with a particular law before it becomes a particular bill before it becomes law. Because the House of Representatives has to agree in the most part, and even if we argue that the winning party who forms government has the majority in the lower house, in the upper house there must also be a clear majority, and the 13 senators on the government side cannot clear it. It needs at least one from the opposition. So when we hear these two parties come out and cussing each other for certain acts and bills and things that were passed, we should know they're just playing with us. Because if your party never agreed, the law wouldn't pass. So these are things that our people don't know how to reason because they were not taught how the system works. Now, the gentleman also makes the case that the, in addition to school not teaching us valuable stuff, we have to pay for it. Why are we paying for something that we don't want to learn or something that does not benefit us in any way? He makes the case that we pay for the valuable things, and those who can't pay, the system should pay for them. And that is leading a little into UIC's education plan. So I'm just going to mention the 8 pillars of the education plan, and then we move into the one that we're going to be focusing on, the one that we truly radicalize the system, and the teachers who are leaving will be sorted out. The students who are underperforming will be sorted out. But let us look at the pillars of LEAP. All right, so LEAP, our Learning Enrichment Advanced Program, that is what LEAP means. That's the UIC's education program, and it rests on 8 pillars. One is an Afrocentric curriculum that teaches students true African and world history. And in addition to that, focuses on understanding self, understanding human behavior, and understanding money. Now, our Jamaican students will really understand and appreciate what it means to be truly African. Will understand. By the way, did you know the majority of inventions in the world was made by the black race? You can look it up. But we don't know this. We only know slavery. We know about black people committing crime and so forth. But we will be teaching true Afrocentric curriculum that looks at true African history and, in addition, world history, because we are all a part of one world. But in addition to that, we'll be looking at understanding self. So our students will leave school understanding how their body works, how their mind works, how their emotions work, their spiritual self. And once they understand how their self works, they'll know how to take care of themselves, physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and so forth. Understanding human behavior will work to build social ties and relationships. Um, for example, there are some young men, for example, who don't understand when their partner reacts a certain way, and so they get offended. But if they understand human behavior, they'll be able to not destroy a relationship, and if they're prone to violence, not to contribute to domestic violence. And if they understand their own self, they would understand how they're getting angry, and they're getting into a state where they would not react in a productive manner. And this comes from being aware of self. And that's just one example of how this can benefit society. Understanding money is another sub factor under the Afrocentric curriculum. And if you see, if we understood really how to make money work for us, we would not need to thief back from people. We would not need to scam other persons. We would not need to rely on the drugs trade. But from within school, we know how to let our little lunch money, or if we get it, or the money that the government will provide if we totally cannot afford it. We'll know how to put that away bit by bit so that we can have a return upon leaving school. So this is integral to the development of a society. But going on to the other pillars, the second pillar of LEAP is focusing on the core subjects that will prepare children for life. Now, what do we need? What are the absolute subjects that we need for survival? We need math. We must be able to compute basic equations, addition, subtraction, and so forth. We must understand science. We must understand civics, how our country works, and the social institutions and regulations. And we must understand communications. But communication is not just English language and patois, by the way, which is our language, but communication also looks at all the aspects of communication, body language, facial cues, how we gesticulate, posture, our body looks. So students will be able to interpret all sort of cues, whether they're spoken, whether it is body position, emotional language will be developed. So these are the four main subjects that you need in life, that we all need. And the LEAP, or Learning Enrichment Advanced Program, will focus really on teaching those basic things that we need to survive in society. All right, the third pillar of LEAP is teaching science in a cohesive, combined manner instead of in silos separated. So the biology, the physics, the chemistry will be combined to see how they flow into each other. Because if we let us look at driving fast on the road, we know that car accidents happen a lot. Now, someone who understood the laws of inertia would understand that will understand the speed at which he's going and how the car balancing is a risk factor, and would know how the body would react, the biology, if he should come to a sudden stop. So the biology, knowledge of biology and physics, for example, would be combined right there, because it's not separated, but he understands all of that to know that him need to ease up off of the gas now. So when our students really understand how the world works, they're able to better make good judgment calls and to solve problems. Now, if we will be adding trade and technology as part of the sciences, so that students will be better able to participate in the world, in this growing world. So technology is important because it's the age of information. Trade will will help our students to understand how to trade value for value. So all of that together will be the sciences, so that we're better prepared to act in the global environment. Now, the fourth pillar of LEAP is a youth employment program, where youth who are not in a job or in tertiary education are put in an apprenticeship program. So for at least a year. So no youth on the road giving trouble, or being picked up to join gangs, but they'll all be doing something productive. If you're not in college or university or in a job, you learn a skill. And the skills are varied so that we can cater to their interests. So there are skills in agriculture if they want to do that. There are skills in the military, police, medicine, paramedics, fire, craft, manufacturing, and so forth. So if they don't have the subjects, they learn to do the job over time and then get certified through the apprenticeship so they can just filter in the formal employment. The fifth pillar of LEAP is a digital library that contains all the information that somebody needs to be highly educated. So if a Jamaican did not go to school through the digital library, that Jamaica will be able to access all the knowledge that start in schools so that they can self-educate. So education and qualification are two different things. When a person is able to really own education and do it on his or her own time in a way that that speaks of how this person learns, that person becomes truly educated, and this is what we aim for. Number six is a teacher's scholarship. All teachers will receive scholarship to the master's degree so that our teachers are adequately trained to teach our students, and they'll just pay back this scholarship to their taxes. That 10% income tax will pay the government back for that scholarship over time. And we want to make it clear, by the way, that education and qualification are two different things. Now we can have persons who have master's degrees who are not equipped to think logically, who are not equipped to address any problem outside of their qualification. Some of them can't even address that. They just were able to regurgitate and throw back the knowledge that or the data that they were fed. When we talk about teaching students at the master's level, we're talking about true education, where our teachers are actually possessing the knowledge that they can address any situation with the knowledge that they have. Number seven, a complete rollout of child nutrition. You can learn from hungry belly. So, for our students to perform at their optimum best, we will ensure that all children are eating well and their health is taken care of. For those families that cannot provide for their child, that cannot pay for education or meals or so forth, through the 10% GCT, that's the sales tax, all of the collective GCTs will be used to take care of these people. So we ensure that our children have the optimum in health care and nutrition so they can actively and fully participate in the education program. Now, the last pillar of LEAP that we be looking at, that we be examining going forth, is a truly public education system. Now, under a truly public education system, it is the parents and the students, the community who are stakeholders. So instead of from the top down system where the government says, this is how schools will be structured, this is what you will learn, this is how we'll do things, it is the people who are partaking in the education program who will be operating and feeding into the schools. Now, that is something that is not um, readily appreciated by people, but we be looking at why is it that this model is better for our students. Why is it a model that will accommodate how our students learn, what our parents want our children to learn, and how they want them to learn? How is this model better than the government system. Now, to answer the question, we be looking at why shouldn't the government be involved in education? All right, so I'm sharing this. I hope you can see my screen. So we're looking at the short answer. Why shouldn't the government be involved in education? The short answer: government schooling stands in direct opposition to the liberty that this country was founded on. They're talking about America here, because Jamaica was not founded on liberty, but we, the UIC, do stand for liberty. And government schooling stands in direct opposition to our liberty, because in the government schooling system, you have no choice. The, the system fosters unquestioning obedience, acceptance of authority, herd mentality, and dependency. And what that does, by the way, is take away our ability to solve problems and to think for ourselves. Now, can you identify people around you who seem to not have any initiative at all, or to think for themselves without getting instruction from somebody else? It comes from here. And what this causes too is the mentality that we have the right to tell people what to do with themselves, because we learned it through the education system, and our parents learned it from this too, that we must tell another person what we do with them own self, because the system fosters unquestioning obedience. And where does obedience come from? That dominance thing. Also, the government schooling system manufactures equality, and that's in quotations, by lowering standards. In order to incorporate everybody, you lower standards so that everybody can so-called be equal. It also discourages individuality, innovation, curiosity, creativity, and overall excellence. The students must learn how the teacher says they must learn, and the teacher says they must learn the way that the government writes the curriculum. There's no space for a student to learn in the way that's best suited for him and her. The school system also undermines families and other relationships. It undermines religious beliefs, values, and morality. We're going to look at all of that. It fosters social, psychological, emotional, and intellectual dysfunction, and promotes immaturity and perpetual adolescence. So, we are unable to function socially, psychologically, emotionally, and intellectually. Why? Because we are taught to do this, go here, do it like that, without ever incorporating our own social and psychological self. So because we don't get a chance to practice, to solve problems on our own, to give way to our emotional responses, to come up with our own intellectual ideas, that gets stunted. If you do exercise a muscle, it dies, or what we call atrophies. Same thing for our brains. Another thing with the government system is it makes children the victims of political change, victims of special interest groups, researchers, unions, and social reformers. So, if the government decide that we will turn into, let me use this for example. If the government decides that we will turn into a communist state, if we should get a prime minister, for example, who believes in communism, and he can get the House to agree with that, then everything that the children will be taught will be in line with that. So any political change that happens, any special interest groups, we know that in the United States, there are special interest groups like gay rights and so forth, who want to shove their philosophies on the students. So they push that literature in the schools. If the government buys into it, then the children do have no choice but to be taught that thing. The parents can make noise, but if the government decide that they're doing it. And also, the government schooling system undermines the ability of parents to provide their children with the quality and type of education that they desire for them. And we see that in the Jamaica Teaching Council bill that it was being pushed forward before the teachers decided to leave, that even homeschooling would be made illegal unless parents register with the government. So we see the reasons why the government should not be in charge of education, although we are used to it being that way. But to drive this home, we're going to be looking at an article that says, what if we treated schools as monopolies? Jojoya says the culture discourages questioning from home and the government. And that's true. If you don't question, how will you learn? Uh, Jojoya said earlier, even the rote times tables does not need to be taught the way we have been taught in Jamaica and the British system. And it's taught that way because the government um, puts forward that it should be taught that way. No critical thinking goes on. Great comments here, Jojoya. Mr. Patterson says, when government has power to dictate our education, this allows those who control our politicians and parties to brainwash an entire nation using the very tax people. You see why government should not be in charge of education. They use your money to brainwash you. Cool Guy says, my two best classes in college were philosophy and critical thinking. Trust me, I thought I was bright until I took those two classes and only to realize I was only regurgitating information. All right, but how many persons will be able to take a class in philosophy and critical thinking? We have to make these ways of thinking natural and incorporated into our learning. So now we look at what if we treated public schools as monopolies, which they actually are. Now, this article was written someone named Kevin Curry Knight, and Kevin puts forward a comparison between between education system and monopoly. All right, so we're going to take a few minutes and go through this just to drive home the fact that really our education system is a monopoly that doesn't work in our best interest. Now, many of my friends who defend public education are also the political type who are very worried about monopolies. They often point to the damage that companies with large market shares, think Amazon, Walmart, and Google, can do. These friends point out how these companies' large market presence allows them to squeeze out competitors, exploit employees, and hold customers captive. These points, of course, are debatable, but what really troubles me is that while these friends decry monopolies in commerce, they defend a huge monopoly, public schools. All the same criticisms apply, but never seem to. Recently, 60 Minutes ran an interesting piece on Google and why, according to interviewees, they are a monopoly. The segment's host stipulated that in 2017, 90% of all internet searches came through Google. Well, that is debatable, according to Kevin. It depends on where the search was conducted. On desktop computers, only 67% of searches use Google, while on mobile phones, Google owns 91% of searches. But whatever the case, Google has an impressive market share in many areas, from operating systems, Android at 7% of phones, to web browsers. Chrome is the preferred browser on 60% of desktops. Other companies have recently been decried in the press as monopolies. Amazon's seeking of a second headquarters and its recent purchase of Whole Foods Market has renewed cries that it is a monopoly. Amazon's total share of retail sales in the US in 2016 is 6%, which is small. But if we narrow the range to online retail, Amazon handled a whopping 53% of all sales. Other companies like Walmart, the world's largest company, and Facebook, which dominates the social media space, are also frequently called monopolies. The market presence of these companies is surely impressive. Is it enough to call monopolies? I'd argue it isn't, because all of these companies are in industries where competitors do exist and others are free to enter the market. It may not be easy to go toe to toe with Google, Walmart, or Amazon, but competitors like Mozilla Firefox in the internet browser space and Target in the shopping space do exist. What isn't in dispute is that all the companies listed above have dominant market positions. And this, my friends argue, gives them unfair leverage and power to do things like squeeze suppliers, exploit workers, and hold consumers hostage. My contention is that if monopolies, at least as described above, are bad, then public schools are possibly the worst kind of monopolies. Purely for the sake of argument, let's relate that Amazon is a monopoly because of its ownership of 51% of online retail sales. Public schools serve around 90% of US children's K 12 education, which is kindergarten to grade 12. In 2014, New Orleans was the city with the most private schools, and even then, public schools accounted for 75% of the market share. Now, that eclipses Amazon's online market share. So that means public school really is monopoly. And it gets worse. Even if we argue about whether Amazon engages in sneaky sales tactics to get consumers to buy more than they otherwise would, Amazon must cater to consumer demand to stay dominant. Not so for public schools. Why does Amazon stay on top? Gives people what they want, caters to consumer demand. But do public schools cater to what we want? Let us imagine a different scenario, treating companies like public schools. Since Amazon dominates online retail, imagine that the government makes them an offer. If Amazon agrees to supply citizens all with free stuff to satisfy our wants and needs, then in return, Amazon will gain its revenue exclusively through tax money. Another term of the agreement is that Amazon will not ask us what we want or allow us to individually request items, but will give us all a predetermined package of goods that the political process, that's the politicians and the bureaucrats, in conjunction with Amazon, say we should have. You want to opt out deal? Not to worry, say Amazon and the government. You can choose to shop at other retailers. Just fill out a set of forms explaining why to our satisfaction and recognize that your tax money still goes to Amazon. You'll just have to pay those other retailers out of pocket. I doubt any of my anti monopoly public school supporting friends would accept this arrangement. They would immediately recognize the problem. Amazon would no longer have great incentive to offer us products that satisfy our as opposed to its wants. The government would be forcing people to support a company they may not want to support. And while there is an illusion of choice, those who can't afford to pay twice, a tax to Amazon and money to other retailers, would be left out. And if anyone wanted a job in retail, they would have one real option, which is Amazon. So, why the double standard? I submit that this situation is exactly what our public school systems do. Maybe public schools have such a high market share because they are just so good. But I think it is more plausible that the deck is artificially stacked in their favor. Public schools are guaranteed tax funding, whereas private competitors must convince consumers to pay tuition over and above the tax that they're already paying. Now, this argument allows public school systems to behave like the worst sorts of monopolies. My friends would point out that Walmart's and Amazon's powerful market presence allows them to bully employees. Yet, these friends also believe that many states persistently pay teachers poorly. And since public schools educate around 90% of students, there is very little price shopping teachers can do but to ask the state for a raise. So we see where the state, the government, bullies teachers, pay them poorly, and what can the teachers do? And as to whether public schools are giving families what they want, the data ranges from lukewarm to pessimistic. So, as I'd expect would happen in our imagined tax supported Amazon example, where Amazon would not really need customers to be satisfied to maintain its dominance. All right, skipping that. All right, and we're going to the last one. I suspect that my well meaning friends do not see public schools as a monopoly in the same way as Amazon or Google because, well, we are used to public schools being the service provider. All right, so we see here, based on this article, that the school system is a monopoly that does not care what you need to learn. It does not care what you want to learn. It tells you what you will learn. So, what will we be doing about that? What is the solution to a government paid education system that teaches us things that we don't need and teaches it in a way that we can't learn and we have no say? And if we want to go to a private school that teaches things that are more in line with our progress and will help us to give to society in a meaningful way and develop ourselves, we still have to pay the government the tax for the public school system and then go and pay school fee to the private school. Now, what is the solution? Now, the video that we had looked at before, in that video, the gentleman called for defunding of the government education system. Now, we are going to be looking at that in greater detail. Free market education. Really, what is free market education? All right, we're going to be learning about that now, and see you back in a while.
All right, America, what if we had public supermarkets that operated like public schools? The government would assign you to a local grocery store. Groceries would be free at the store. You paid for them through your taxes. You wouldn't have as many options. Sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But that's exactly the way the schools are run. Here now, the author of the Wall Street Journal editorial entitled If Supermarkets Were Run Like Public Schools, George Mason University economist and Professor Don Boudreaux. Professor Boudreaux, it's a pleasure. Welcome here.
Thanks.
Is education a right or is it a good?
It's a good. It's a good. We certainly should have a right to pursue it, but it's a good. It's a good just like food. And yes, there are differences, but we know from experience that when you have competition and private entrepreneurs competing for consumer dollars, we get really good food distribution service in America. Groceries, even in inner cities, work pretty darn well. Some K through 12 schools don't.
Something happened 125 years ago or so, in the beginning of the progressive era in America, when the government decided that it should operate schools. And as a result, we all pay for them, whether we need them or not. They have no competition. They have a continuous flow of customers, the students. I know you've been criticized for calling students customers, but in this model, they are the customers. And they have an unending cash flow, no matter how lousy a job they do. Could anything survive like that in the free market?
No. In fact, Judge, it's even worse. It's not, they get more cash when they do poorly. Because what do you
mean?
What do schools use as an excuse for more money? They say, oh, it's true, we're performing poorly. Therefore, that means we need even more money. Can you imagine a worse incentive system? Suppose your ratings really fell.
They're not going to give me a raise.
Well, but if you operated like the schools, you'd tell your bosses here at Fox, you'd say, that only proves I need more money, and they'd give you more money.
All right, what would it be like if the government didn't run schools? Who would run them? Where would they be? How would we get to them? What would they cost?
You'd have parents running them, essentially, in the same way that families run supermarkets. You have entrepreneurs who make these offerings to customers. Customers go in, they choose what they like, and the entrepreneurs respond to those demands. Prices keep falling, selection keeps improving, quality keeps improving. That's what would happen in K through 12 education.
Prices fall,
Yep.
Selection improves,
Yep.
Quality improves
Yep.
because of competition.
Competition.
Which is something the government doesn't know, doesn't understand, fears, and essentially outlaws.
Absolutely.
Because if I want to send children to a private school, I am free to do so. But I am not free to take half of my property tax bill that goes to the local schools and use that for my children. I still have to spend that money the way the government wants it spent.
Terrible incentive system. Awful.
Right.
They get their money regardless of how they perform.
Is there a winning argument to be made here? Or are you and I and many of the people watching us now sort of whistling in the wind? Or is the concept of the public school system so embedded in Americans, good, decent Americans that want a good bang for their buck, that this will never change?
Judge, if you look at the data on inner city families, they want more school choice. They want tax credits to send their kids to private schools. They want vouchers. They want more school choice. They want to get their kids at least into charter schools. It's the teachers' unions who don't want competition in public schools. Let's face it, the K through 12 public schools in America today are run chiefly for the teachers' unions. That's who they run for, not for the kids.
All right. Social Security broke. Medicare broke. Amtrak broke. Medicaid broke. The post office broke. The schools broke in that they consume money. They don't produce any.
Yeah.
Is change brewing? Is the public going to wake up to this?
I hope so. I hope so. And, you know, we're all doing our part, writing articles, what you do here in Fox. I hope change is brewing because it can't go on. You cannot continue to operate broke for long.
Got it. Professor Don Boudreaux, economist from George Mason University. Great article, great comparison. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
The IRS has gone political.
All right, a free where parents funds be running the system. Can everybody hear me? Hello, type in the chat box if you can hear me. All right, great. All right, I think my internet went down a little. All right, so it's good that you can hear me. All right, so free market education where parents are involved in running the schools. Parents are the ones who are in charge of how school is funded. It is something that's unusual because we are not used to it, but we will be looking at it more in depth, where schools that are not performing, instead of the government throwing more money on them, the school either operates in a way that will bring value to the students and other stakeholders, or they're shut down. Would that be valuable to our nation? All right, I let you decide. But while you think about it, here is another video that explains the free market education system. Tom Block is a business person who became a teacher, and he was a CEO for a big corporation in America, and he left that, became a teacher, and now he's giving his views on the system. All right, watch this and see.
I think part of the problem in this country is that education has been pretty much of a monopoly. And monopolies are not a good thing for the consumer. Maybe a good thing for the worker who is employed by the monopoly, but not such a good thing for the consumer. And so I think we need to create much more of a free enterprise system in education in this country. And so we need to make it easier, for example, for people to make mid-career changes in order to become teachers. Today, it's very difficult for someone who had a career like me in business to become a teacher in a public school because of certification requirements in the states. And that's a very onerous proposition for a lot of folks, both financially and in terms of the amount of time it takes to become certified. And so I think what happens is that we are creating such an obstacle in this particular case of being able to attract some really wonderfully talented people into the profession because of these really almost ridiculous hurdles that have to be jumped. And so we need to look at relaxing some of those requirements. And I know, for example, there's an effort underway in some states to have an online certification process that can be done rather cheaply and quickly so that people can receive a basic education in terms of preparing them for their own classroom. But we need to think outside the box, I guess, a bit when it comes to public education in this country, and not be hemmed in by some of the monopolistic approaches that we've had in the past. I think good schools will do well. Where there are good teachers in good schools, they will do well. Where there are not good teachers and not good schools, they should be allowed to fail. Just like any other business, you know, if a restaurant isn't serving good food or provides poor service, then it's okay, in my view, to let that business fail, be shut down. And I think the same should be true in education. If a school is not doing well, in other words, it's hiring teachers and administrators that are not cutting the mustard, then let that school fail. Let it go out of business. You know, some people look at the fact that we've got about 4,000 charter schools today in the United States. About 400 of them have closed. About 10% failure rate. Now, you could look at that and say the movement is failing. If already in this country 10% of the charter schools have closed, there's something wrong. I look at that statistic and say this is evidence that the charter school movement in the United States is working, because bad schools are shut down, and that is healthy.
This is a very uncomfortable thing to consider for some people. In our culture, an underperforming school is allowed to run, and taxpayers' money is sent, nevertheless, to make the school operate. And every year, thousands of students are filtered to that school, although it may be underperforming. if you stop to consider, would not this system be better for our country and better for our students overall, where schools will have to pull up their socks to remain relevant? Competition drives improvement. For those persons who had what was it called? Lime cable and wireless phones back in the day. Credit was very expensive and phones were very expensive. And when Digicel came on the scene, can you remember how the price of credit fell down? Because Digicel came with cheaper credit, with cheaper phones, and for cable and wireless before it became Lime and then Flow, for it to remain in the market, it had to improve its service. But then Digicel and Lime had to both improve their service. When Claro came into the scene, Claro is no longer with us, but this is what competition does. Do you want a light bill to decrease? Let a viable power company come in Jamaica that charges cheaper rates and gives the Jamaican people efficient service. Then you're going to see, oh, light bill go down. They can do better, but JPS is a monopoly. Our school system can do better if we get rid of the monopoly. Just as Flow improved their system back when they were cable and wireless and Lime, because of the competition in the system. In the same way, if our education, if our schools had competition, they were not just all under one monopoly. The 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 teaching would be more efficient. The environment would be more accepting and more geared towards effective learning. So we have looked at the free market system where it is the stakeholders, where the parents who are responsible for funding the schools. If this were the case, then schools would do all that they can to make their own institution more attractive to parents. And in so doing, they would ensure that the teachers that they employ are among the best. And if the teacher has shortcomings, they either step up the teacher's performance or release the teacher, and then that teacher will have to step up his or her game in order to remain relevant to teach. And then what would be the byproduct of that? Our students will be getting better education, better able to face the world. So under the UIC education plan, LEAP, we have a basic curriculum that every school must teach. But then every school can add to that to make their program or their institution even more desirable. Now, how would this work though? It's simple, really. In each school, there would be groups of people who act as the directors of the company, because now the school would be an enterprise, and we call this social education enterprise. So instead of education being government dictated and so robbing us of our choice, robbing us of true education, the school will now be fully owned by the public. No, we say public education, the public will own the education system. But under our system, the public truly will own the system, because they will be in charge of managing under the guidance of the Ministry of Education, of UIC, of UIC governed system, of course. And every single government-owned institution in the industry will be converted into this social education enterprise, where the public will be offered full ownership, full management. Now, how do we ensure that things are run effectively, efficiently, legally, and so forth? Now, members of the public who want to who want to build schools will be free to identify land for the purpose to raise the funds to build schools. Now, in one of the videos, the video done by Mr. Christie, that showed how the government wasted funds. Because the government no longer had funds to build schools, because they waste the money, less than half of the schools that were intended to be built were built, which contributed to overcrowding of the system, overcrowding of classrooms. But what if the people themselves wanted to build schools and did not have to rely on government money? Then we see here a way being made clear for there to be more schools. So public who want to build schools and be a part of the business now can identify land, build the schools, and then they have to be would have to pass a course in governance, education governance, so that we can be sure that they will be able to manage the schools. So these stakeholders pass through this course in good governance and financial literacy for at least 6 months. And they must be Jamaican citizens, by the way, because Jamaicans must own their education system. It's not a case where, like in Bauxite, we have the Americans and the Russians, so forth, owning the system. Jamaicans will own the education system and must go through financial literacy and education governance. And so they'll be able to sit on these committees, boards, as you will, and parents will have a say, like an AGM, in how schools are run. So that under this system now, we will have variety. So we have the basic curriculum, the science, the math, the communication, the civics, taught in such a way that the government would have met with all the education players and collaborated on the best way going forward. But in addition to regular teaching, we may have specific schools such as language schools, schools just dedicated to learning other languages in addition to the core subjects. We could have sports schools. We could even have manufacturing schools, so that even at high school level, students are learning a skill that can bring them forward for success when they have graduated, allowing for variety as the parents shall see fit for their children. And the other stakeholders will fit Jamaica to be a global winner as it relates to education. And then it will cater to the different ways in which students learn. Now, Albert Einstein said that everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. For a person who may not be good at math or languages, but good at dance, we can cater to schools that will build kinesthetic arts or performing arts, because the public would have seen the need for that. The person who wants dance would want a way to move forward in dance. For somebody who may be gifted with nature, for example, we could have nature schools. The possibilities are endless. The different kinds of intelligences, some theories say there are 8 intelligences, some say 9, would be catered to, and our children would learn in the best way that's suited for them, because now it's not an overarching control that say you must do this way, then this way, but a system that allows the core subjects to be taught. Then whatever else that caters to the social sphere and the parental needs as held under certain standards. But what would be the role of government really under this system? One role of government is interacting with the schools to develop the courses. So the courses are not developed in isolation from the government, because there must be oversight, but there's no micromanagement. Um, the government will also ensure that each school has an open and easy line for engagement with officials from the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health. The government would be really taking up an advisory role and regulatory role. So we ensure that certain criteria and regulations are met, and we advise. The government under UIC governance in education would require schools to have a minimum expectation for students when they graduate. So there will be this expectation that's agreed on, that must at least reach a certain level before they graduate. So we're not just churning out students and pushing them out into society. The schools must have a minimum expectation met. Also, the government will advise on the minimum of teacher expectation and productivity. Allow the schools their leeway, but there must be a minimum level that must meet. The government will also receive and review the details on teachers, such as their education, their experience, their performance, and also the performance of the school. And the government will also be managing and utilizing the workfare program, which is that program that comes out of the 10% GCT, the sales tax, that will allow the students of parents who cannot afford education to be enrolled at education up to the PhD level at no cost. For those parents who can pay, they'll pay. So they will pay for education. So we're getting rid of this free education business, because free education means it's paid for by the government, and we have already seen that the government being in charge of education is not a good thing. It's not favorable. So instead of government being in charge of education, parents would be in charge of education. So we put the responsibility for education back in the hands of parents, where it should have been in the first place. So parents should be responsible for their children's education, and the government now takes an advisory and regulatory role. Now, as we said before, if it is that everybody has to pay for school, there are some who can't pay or some who can pay some. The government now, under the workfare program, would pay for those who can't pay, and the parents now pay back through their taxes. That's the 10% income tax and 10% GC. So to benefit your work and pay back the government just by deducting your taxes. But what if the parent can't work? Then the government will just pay it off. So we see that even the most disenfranchised and unfortunate persons in society will be taken care of. The thing is, the danger of a free system, whether healthcare or education, is that not only does the government have a monopoly and the government doesn't really care about your choice, but the institution, whether the school or hospital, does not get enough resources because its source of income is limited. Back when there was students paying school fees, schools would have better able to avoid to afford their own markers and so forth. Now, under the system of free education, schools will be sufficiently resourced and funded so that teachers can perform in their optimum level, and then the students can benefit. But there's a but. Can we afford it? Now, we may think all well and good, but we know that education is expensive. So education being expensive and some people not being able to afford it, how much people, how many of the people will really be able to afford an education system funded totally by the people? No, this is where we will blow your minds, and I'm going to welcome the expert on this, the economist student, Jason Christie. All right, so Mr. Christie, you should be joining us anytime soon now. Oh, great. And he will be showing us how under this system, oh, by the way, Mr. Christie is the one who had created that video that we looked at earlier, how the government before mismanage our economy. All right, so this he will now show us how under the system where you will pay for education, it will actually be more affordable on the public side and the government side. All right, Sir Christie, your show now. I have talked too much.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone. Uniters all. Let's dive into the presentation. Hope you guys can see my screen. I'm not able to see the screen. So Chase, just let me know if there's any issues. All right, just let me know if there's any issues, and I'll try my best to adjust it because I can't see anything beyond the screen right now. All right, so the United Independence Congress Public Education Reform and Budget. We are going to culminate everything Mr. Chase just said, as well as the president have been saying for some time. All right, so the first thing is result of salary increase. So we hear the opposition as well as the government talking about a salary increase for the teachers, which is great, wonderful. I am concerned that with the result of a salary increase, teachers will be pushed even further into a nightmare, because currently they are having to deal with broken students, overcrowded classrooms, many things that allow them to not perform their tasks well. And I've spoken to many teachers that have left, and they're saying one of the main things that made them leave is poor administration, overcrowded classroom. Believe it or not, like, money is not the number one reason why they're leaving. It's just a byproduct. All right. So I'm concerned that when the salary increase comes, teachers will be asked to produce even more. And the fact of the matter is, teachers can do so much and no more. Like, the parents have to play their part, the society has to play their part, the government has to play their part. So, with that being said, teachers, we need a whole educational reform. We need a whole educational reform. We need to throw out the old system and bring in a new system, and I'll show you how we're going to do that. But first, let us talk about the state of our current education. Hope you guys are hearing me clearly. So this is a table taken from Statin. They release labor market reports every year, and they tell us where we are in terms of the labor markets, the total amount of persons in the labor market, those who are unemployed and employed. And I just took a snapshot of what was going on to present to you. So here we have a table. All right, it's table 3.13. It says employed labor force by highest examination passed in the year 2018 to 2019. So here we have the year, and some months, which is like quarterly reports. All right. So here we have a total number of persons in the employed labor force, those who are employed legally, of course. These are the persons who are in the employed labor force, and these are the numbers over the years, pretty consistent, and we break them down in terms of qualifications. So we see that 750,000 people, up to 1.2 million, 750,000 people have no CXCs, none at all, none. We see that 1,200 have basic CXC, whatever that is. We see that 1 to 2 persons, students who pass 1 or 2 subjects is 38,000 basically. We see that persons who pass 3 or 4 is 63,000. Persons who pass 5 and more is 89,000. Persons who pass 1 or 2 CAPE is 2,300. Persons who pass 3 or more CAPE is 13,000. And persons who have degrees is 153,000 persons. So I want to pay very close attention to this part right here, the persons who have none. So in January 2018, which is this section here, we see that 62.27% of the employed labor force had no CXC. We went ahead to October 2019 here, this is where we are, and we saw that 58.66% of the employed labor force have no CXC. So before you start rejoicing, say, hey, the number is falling. We go back to 2013, January, and saw that 57.88 persons had no CXC. It's not in this table, but I took it from a previous report. You can find this online. It's on Statin website to cross-reference this number. So we see that the number of students who doesn't have any qualification over the years have been consistently around 60%. So let's think about it. Consistently, and approximately 60% of the employed labor force have no CXC, the basic level of certification. This number is a complete nightmare. This number is atrocious. Paying teachers higher salary can't fix this. Paying the teachers higher salary cannot fix this. Last time I checked, teachers never went to Hogwarts to study education. They went to Michael and St. Joseph College. Teachers aren't wizards that studied at Hogwarts or magicians to wave a wand and fix it. Teachers can do so much and no more. And this is a true testament of that. All right? So let's move forward. How do we move forward? That's the million-dollar question. How do we move forward? And Chase alluded to it a lot, but let me just break it down in bullet points. So we want to transform. This is it, you know. We want to transform Franklin Town Primary into a Stella Maris Prep. We want to transform Franklin Town Primary into a Stella Maris Prep. Once we figure out how to do this, we multiply throughout the economy and let all the low schools be up there with the top schools. That's what we want to do. We want to figure out how to do it for Franklin Town, and we'll figure out how to do it for Rallington Town, Mountain View, Denham Town, wherever. That's what we want to do. Sorry if I'm speaking too fast. I will try to slow down. All right. How do we move forward? Back to the million-dollar question. We will allow schools to operate mostly independent of the government, and Chase alluded a lot to this. The schools will be like corporations operating. They will be required to teach students about finances, and this is mandated by the government. Finances, be self-aware, know oneself, know one's mental health, physical health. They will be required to learn about community, how to build relationships, how to build romantic, business, and just civil relationship among people, understanding oneself. These are standard things that all schools should be teaching, not just at the basic school, but from basic school straight up to high school. We need people to understand money, self, and community. All right? Schools will operate in conjunction with the parents, and I heard Chase alluded a lot to this. That is, deliver the education the parents want, not what the government says should be learned. So beside that little caveat we have regarding finance, knowing oneself and knowing one's community, parents will now have full autonomy of what their child will learn. So that doesn't mean parents should go to the school and bad up the teacher them and say, oh, this is what my child learn. It simply means that you will only send your child to a school that provides the education you want. You will be able to send your child to a school that provides the education you want. There will be no quarreling, just like when a store increases them prices, you just move to a different store and purchase somewhere else. You don't fight. That's the kind of environment we want to encourage in the education space. Schools will now somewhat operate for profit, with proceeds being used in the school to further improve the facility. So they're operating for profit, but not for shareholders. It won't go to the shareholders. It will go to the school. It will go back to the school. That is, make the school solar powered. We, as in, by the third or fourth UIC administration, we should have every school being solar powered. We can have digital teaching boards, those foreign nice technology, digital teaching boards. We can have lockers. We can hire a karate coach. We can, build out a nice music system and have a violinist come and teach you some violin, table tennis, you name it. whatever is needed to attract students to the school. So schools will have to get really efficient and really creative. Hope you're hearing me still. Hope you're hearing me still. School will therefore have to charge higher tuitions comparable to that of private schools, naturally, because these nice things can't come willy-nilly. In order for schools to compete, in order for Franklinton to be up there with Stella Maris, they need to charge higher tuition. But the thing is, the reason why we allow these schools to operate independently is because the government is very inefficient. You tell me a country with a government that's more efficient than Amazon, than Walmart, than Wells Fargo. You tell me a government that's more efficient than these organizations, and I'll eat the jacket I'm wearing. Anyways, that's just a joke. Moving on. Tuition level, or tuition by level. So these are all hypothetical numbers. So don't catch a fit. It's just all hypothetical, but we're showing you the feasibility of it. All right. So basic schools, $150,000 per annum to give them quality education. Primary schools, $200,000 per annum to give them quality education. High schools or secondary schools, $250,000 per annum to give them quality education. So the person who have 4 children have to find $1 million. That's crazy, right? We're gonna show you how everything works. So don't worry, don't catch a fit. Major expenses by school. So teacher's salary is a school's largest expense, and as such, the starting salaries are, and these are some suggested starting salaries for a teacher. For basic school, $1.6 million per annum. Primary schools, $2.2 million per annum. And secondary schools, $2.4 million per annum. So currently, in Jamaica, persons may say, that's not money. How kind of money that? But remember, when the UIC builds the education system that is desired by the people, we will also be building an economy that is desired by the people. So therefore, this salary under the UIC government will be able to afford you a comfortable life, because we will have real money. We'll have a real money system. And of course, these aren't written in stone. Schools can charge more or less. It depends. All right? Schools can charge more or less. Understanding the data. Data is very important. I used the Ministry of Education Jamaica School Profile for the school year 2018-2019. In that school year, 430,000 students were enrolled in public schools, but the capacity of all schools were 455. So in essence, the number of enrollment was less than the total capacity of the school. So when you see a school overpopulated, that shouldn't necessarily be because we have space in all the schools, but everybody wants to send them picnic or Arden or KC or St. Catherine High. So these schools are naturally more overpopulated, when Tarrant underpopulated, Denhamton High underpopulated. Why? Because nobody don't want them picnic or quote unquote done school. So then find a way. Side note, Excelsior's capacity, Excelsior High School's capacity is 2,000. However, they have 2,400 students in this school year. So yeah, these things happen. And when you do that now, the learning outcome falls. So you want your picnic up right school, but at the same time, when them pop up the classroom, the learning outcome fall. So it's a counterintuitive or a counterproductive process. All right? So we don't want that. We want schools, I'll explain further. The report provided the following information for public schools. Gender, which is whether the school is a co-ed, all girl, all boy, whether it's located in rural Jamaica or urban Jamaica, whether what's the capacity of the school. As I mentioned, Excelsior was 2,000 capacity. The enrollment was 2,400, way above the quota. Number of teachers at the school and student-teacher ratio. Student-teacher ratio is the number of students per one teacher, which is very important, and I'll show you why. I added a few more variables to the data set in order to do the required calculations. So now, there are 2 ways to do the calculation: by capacity of the school or by enrollment. I chose to use capacity of the school for consistency because enrollment vary every year. Also, I chose to use capacity because we don't want schools to go beyond the capacity and overcrowd classrooms and learning outcomes plummet. So we will encourage schools to stay within the capacity limits. So if a school can only hold 4,000 students, 400 students, like 410 It's a nice tickle. You're kind of pushing it, but we'll, leave it alone. So we don't want schools to go too far above the capacity. Yeah, we're gonna understand the data. So the additional data or variables I added were parish. I added parish to it. I added total school income by capacity, which is total tuition. I added total salary expense for the school. So this is the total amount of money the schools are going to pay the teacher. Then the teacher them at the starting salary and thing. Government's portion, because of course we will be carrying some of the burden. And provisional profit by capacity. So provisional profit is just the profit after you pay your teachers. And of course, schools will have to pay light bill, water bill, cleaning staff, ancillary staff, all these persons, cooking staff, all these persons. Schools will need to employ these people. So that's why I call it provisional staff. Some persons call it our provisional profit. Some persons call it gross profit. But we just call it provisional profit. And of course, profit margins, which is the provisional profit divided by total school income. So provisional profit divided by total school income gives us the profit margin. Okay, cool. And a point to note, I did some reading, and it's customary, or it's international best practice for a school to have a profit margin of 35% after they pay their teachers. Or after they pay their staff, they have a profit margin of 35%. Just bear that in mind. Well, let me drink some water. So it's really dry. Hope you're following. We calculated the number of teachers a school would need to achieve a student teacher ratio of 70% of 17 to 1. Let me break this down. So I also did some reading, and I learned that the optimal number of students, or the optimal student teacher ratio a school needs in order to perform properly or have good educational outcome is 18 students to 1 teacher. So we know the capacity of the school. I brought it down to 17. So I want these schools or classrooms to have 17 to 1 teacher. I took the capacity of the school. And I divided it by 17. So here we go. If a school has 100 students, they will need 100 divided by 17 teachers, which is basically 6. So to achieve a student teacher ratio of 17, which is like international best practice, like to achieve this ratio, we need to have 6 teachers in a school of 100. All right, so this is how we will go about calculating the number of teachers a school will need. And we call this the potential. Right here, we call it the potential number of teachers. Okay? Furthermore, this will achieve some sense of consistency for the school's expected expense. Based on the capacity of the school. Results time. Results. So I did this for the schools. All right, so this is basic school, capacity teachers, and income by parish for average classroom of 17. So I broke it down by parish: Clarendon, Hanover, Kingston, Manchester, all the way down to Westmoreland. So we have 45 public basic schools. I had no idea. I thought we had more. But let's just use Clarendon. So Clarendon have 5 schools, all right? Public schools that the government operate. Clarendon have 5 schools, the capacity of 640. Therefore, they will need 38 teachers to operate in order to have a student teacher ratio of 17 for this capacity. Based on the tuition, which is 150,000, schools will collect this amount of money, which is 96 million. So the 5 schools will have $96 million. That's wild, right? And the school salary expense will be to hire the teachers, the potential number of teachers, of course. So the school salary expense will be 62 million, leaving a provisional profit of 33 million and a profit margin of 34. All right, so let's say, for instance, all the schools are of the same size. If we divided this among the 5 schools, it would be like each school gets 6.6 million. So each school will then have 6.6 million to pay for additional things. All right, let's look at Hanover. So we see that the schools in Clarendon will have 6.6 million, but the schools in Hanover, look at the profit margin, or the provisional profit is 25 million. If we divide this between the two schools, we see that schools will have 12.5 million to play with after they pay their teachers to pay light bill, this, that. And we continue this all the way down throughout the parishes. And we realize that basic schools, they won't be as profitable as the other schools, because basic schools have less students than all the other schools. And even though they have a nice profit margins, the absolute profit isn't that great. But we have solutions for all of that. You have no worries. Moving on. Primary schools. So we break it down by parish again, all right? Let's take St. Andrew. St. Andrew have 50 public primary schools. Capacity of 24,000. In order to have a student-teacher ratio of 17, you need 1,400 teachers. Schools' total income will be 4.9 billion, rounding up to the closest 100 million, of course. So you're gonna have 4.9 million here, or 4.89. The salary expense will be 3.1 billion, and we see a provisional profit of 1.7 million. So if I take my calculator and divide that, 1.732 divided by 50, we see that each primary school could have a provisional profit of $34 million. So you say, even though the primary schools have the same profit margins as the basic school, we see that they will have a more absolute profit. Because why? Primary schools are bigger than basic school, so them get more tuition. All right, moving on to high schools. I hear say target really interesting. Let's take Portland, for instance. The capacity is 5,000. The potential teacher needed for the 5,000 is 294. Total tuition will be 1.2 billion. We see the provisional profit is 544. We see that the provisional profit is $544 million. If we divide that among the 5 schools in Portland, each school is looking at over $100 million in profit. So so them can put in them solar panels, them can put in a tennis court, them can put in this, them can put in that. Whole heap of things, because you have to, after you pay your light bill and them standard things, of course, you have a lot of room. You can invest in better furniture, you can pay the teachers more, you can do whole heap more, whole heap of room for growth and improving the educational outcome. And of course, technical high schools, which are my favorite. The technical high school, them got paid in the money. Check this out. Herbert Marson in St. James, they're the only technical high school in St. James, have 2,400 students. Look at their provisional profit. Their provisional profit is $260 million after them pay all teachers. That's mind-blowing. The amount of damage. My thing is, when everybody leave a technical high school, they should be able to fully install a solar system. That's one of the skills I would propose every technical high school supply the girls or the boys with. Girls and the boys with. Everybody that attends a technical high school, when you leave, supposed to have actionable skills. Everybody should be able to install a solar system completely. Under the UIC government, you're going to have way less duties or even zero duties on solar systems. So your solar panels, your batteries, your inverters, these are going to be way cheaper. Plus, you're going to have an influx or a huge supply of persons who can install it. So the price of installing solar systems will be low, and the price that you pay for the solar systems will be low. Way will be having solar systems on their houses, and you can sell light to your neighbor, sell light down the road. It doesn't matter. It's just way better under the system. And of course, total school capacity. So this is a total school capacity for all the schools. I want you to pay attention to this number. So this is the total number. This is the total tuition that every school will collect. That is given the capacity of the school, of course. So this is the total number that the schools are expected to collect. All right, pay attention to this number now. Boom. What the taxpayer will pay. I would have put government, but more if I get it in your mind, so the taxpayers will pay for this. Let me just make it known clear from now. Everybody in a nation benefits from a smarter population. Everybody in a nation benefits from higher educational output. With that being said, we must all bear the burden to educate our children. All right? Because everybody benefits from a smarter society. Everybody benefits. Less crime, more productivity. It's just better all the way around. So we all have to invest in our children's future. So if schools operate profitably, or if schools operate privately, we see how they can make a profit. Big profits too. Probably them go up on the stock exchange. Who knows? Probably go up on the stock exchange because Huey was contemplating going on the stock exchange when they were going broke. But that's a different conversation. So schools, may in fact go on the stock exchange. Anyways, you, the taxpayer, will bear approximately 70% of the total tuition of 120 billion. Where did 70% come from? All right, cool. I recall when Mr. Chase was making his presentation that those who can pay will pay, those who can't pay will pay for them, and those who only can afford to pay some will pay the balance for them. Obviously, persons will have to declare their income. This only works if we all pay our taxes. This beautiful system we have here, it falls apart if all of us don't pick up our end of the table. All right, so we made some projections. I made some projections. I did all this. I made some projections, and I say, all right, cool. If some people pay all right, some people pay some, and some people don't pay any at all, I'm projecting that the government is gonna be paying 70% of the full burden. It may be 80%, it may be 85%, it may be 65%. We don't know, but it's a nice little ballpark, and I'll show you why it's a nice ballpark. This will result in approximately, and of course I put the approximately in bold and underline. This will result in approximately 70 billion of the national budget being allocated to public education. So we, the government, won't be interfering with how the schools will operate. So if a school want to be strictly science, say for instance, KC want to be a strictly science school. As you walk through the gate in a 7th grade, you learn about mitochondria. By 9th grade, you do CXC. By 10, 11th grade, you do CAPE. So you're 16 years old in a med school. Think about that. You're 16 years old in med school. They won't be teaching in the history or literature or nothing like that. When you're 16 in a med school, sit down and think about that if you're a strictly science school. Similarly for art school, sports school, music school, Rasta school, Muslim school, Christian school, whatever it is, schools have the autonomy to operate and provide what the parents want. Cool. I must note that in the year 2000-2001, the revised government budget was 82 billion for infant, primary, and secondary school. What does this mean? The government of Jamaica in 2020-2021 budgeted 82 billion for infant, primary, and high school. So far, you see how our system would be cheaper than what we already have. Obviously, there's a bit of room. We can go up to 80. We can go down to 65. We can go up to even 90. But look at that. Look at this now. Even if we spend $90 billion, we still gonna get a way better educational outcome. So even if it wasn't 70 and it was actually 90, which is 90% of the entire burden, we still be getting a way better outcome because we see how schools can operate efficiently and have crazy profits and invest wildly in pools and tennis courts and this and engineering equipments and hire and pay teacher more and attract better teachers. Like, we see how schools can really compete and get a great educational product for all our students. Also, like, if you want to verify this number, you can find it on page 518 of the Ministry of Finance Estimate of Expenditure for the year 2021-2022. All right, so just bear that in mind if you want to cross-reference these numbers. Closing remarks. These numbers are favorable, as it describes the capacity of the government / taxpayers. Don't get it twisted. This is not free education. We're paying for it. We're paying for it with the taxes. We must declare our taxes and pay our taxes. I cannot emphasize that. The person who sell bag juice downtown, if you make $1,000 a day, put on your $100 for your taxes. The nail tech, the barber, hairdressing salon, the woman them with the downtown, with the ear downtown on the bucket, we can all contribute to giving our children a premium education. It don't matter how little you make, it don't matter how much you make. 10% of your income and the GCT to fill the consolidated fund, to fund this is imperative. All right, so we can't do this. The government can't wave a wand. We all have to play our part and let the schools give you the education you want. All right, regardless of the price. If you can't afford it, we pay. If you can afford some, we pay some, depending on the income you declare. Schools, however, will have to operate efficiently to maximize profit while producing eager minds ready to pursue further studies and entrepreneurship in order to attract new students. All this is only possible if everybody pays their 10% income tax and 10% GDP. People of Jamaica, this is our best chance. And I believe this is our utmost best chance to bring a Franklin Town Primary School to a Stella Maris Prep. Thank you.
Hearing me? All right, great.
Could you hear me well?
Yeah, man. Saw and heard everything. Well, no, I'd like to zero in on some things that you had said. I have a document on my phone here for easy reference. Now, we see here where we be requiring people to pay school fees if they can afford. For example, let us look at primary school, $200,000 a year. So if we 200,000, if we broke that up into months, that would
it's gonna be about 65,000
well, 200,000 divided by 12 is 16,000 something, almost 17,000 a month for education at primary school.
I thought it was per term, as persons pay per term.
No, they pay per term, but I'm looking at per month. No, if the government pays 70% of that, that means the government will be paying 11,666. So you see where the government pays the majority of that. So for those who can pay, they'll be paying $5,000. And if we multiply that by the term, that says 15, but the government paying 70,000. 70% of that. Now, a primary school teacher under this system will be making $2,200,000 a year. I don't have the maths brain like you know, so Christie. So I have used my
2.4 if the school's making money. They can earn 2.4 or 2.5. But that's a nice little ballpark to start.
But under the basic assumption that you made, a primary school teacher will be making $183,000 a month. Oh, now you're talking. All right, so a primary school teacher under this assumption, basic assumption, will be making $183,333 a month. Now, look at this figure in opposition to 90-something thousand that the majority of teachers at this level with a bachelor's is taking home. So we see here where our teachers are benefiting and will be less likely to flee the island because they're being compensated much better. And this is just the basic assumption. Now, let me go to high school level. I taught high school English up to 2018. When I left the system after taxes, a high school teacher would have been making between $69,000 to $72,000 after taxes. Now, under this system, a secondary school teacher is making $2.4 million, and that's the basic assumption. per year. If we
That's a
divide
starting
that,
salary.
yeah, man, starting. So if and this works out to $200,000 a month. Can you look at that jump? That jump from 69 to 72,000. If you have your degrees, 90 something. Look at that jump from there to $200,000, and tell me if that would not make our teachers actually more
And
inclined to
year
stay
200
in Jamaica
will
and
go a far way,
contribute.
of course. 200 will go
Yes,
a far way under the UIC Jamaica.
great. Yes, and we should bear in mind that the economy will be stronger under the UIC Jamaica with the or you're saying something, Sir Christie?
No, 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 no.
Oh, the economy will be stronger, so these levels can actually be elevated because guess what? You're taking home more of a pay, 10% for tax, for income tax, and you don't pay more than 10% in GCT. Property tax will be gone. Education tax will be gone. So we're being taxed to pay education tax, and how many of us really benefit from that? All of these random taxes will be gone. So you're taking home more income. Under free market economy, where you have been blocked from a lot of tariffs and so forth, and where the populace would have been empowered with financial literacy and knowledge in trade, you can expect that the value of the dollar will go up, and currency will be stronger. So under this system, a free trade, a free market system of schools, we see where, because of the competition that will arise, because of the higher quality of teachers, by the way, let us not forget the scholarship to master's level, we will find a greater return in education for our students, because of the fact too that education will not be just one size fits all, but the populace will be empowered to, after receiving training from the government, and and being really under the oversight of the government to ensure they maintain the agreed on standards, they can be able to pursue any path of knowledge as long as they teach the core subjects of communication, civics, math, and science, and keep up with the expectation of the turnout, the quality of students that they turn out. As long as the schools maintain that, they can teach anything that will benefit the students in the way that the students are um, more keyed to learn.
And obviously, when they teach, the parents have the choice to change the school. So if everybody want them child learn computer science, then every school have to teach computer science because they will speak. The money will do the talking.
Exactly. So now people have the power. Instead of the government saying you shall learn this, it is what we will learn. It is what we will demand. So the schools will be subject to the law of supply and the demand, also. But then what will be that thing that ensures that everything goes ahead is that the government will be in a regulatory role based on standards and minimum expectations to ensure that quality is achieved. Now, at the start of our life, we looked at some problems in the education system. We saw where school really makes no sense as it is, because students are being taught things that they will never use in life. They are taught things that they will forget as soon as they have done the test, or left school. They are taught to think in a certain way instead of being taught how to think. There's no real cognitive development. Um, their individuality, their originality, their creativity are not stimulated. Teachers, as it were, parents have no choice. We are dehumanized by this system, and government is the one that dictates what goes on, even to the detriment of the of productivity, Our students do not leave school as productive citizens who are able to give value to the economy and to society. But the government churns out these students every year. Now, we have shown how there's a problem with that. And while other countries such as Finland and Denmark may have government-run systems that that really turn out students who perform well as it relates to grades, they get the good grades. How empowered is that are these students in being global citizens? What really do we use to define education? We in Jamaica here through the UIC government will be the trailblazer for true education in the world. Not just a matter of getting the best grades, not just a matter of transitioning from school to job, but we will be producing problem solvers, players in the international global village, where Jamaicans will be making life better for themselves and the entire world because we have engaged the minds of our people. We will, through this free market system, give parents back the responsibility for educating their children. The government will only make sure that they do so and do so well. And for those who are not able to do so because of financial situations, the government will take control of that and take care of the child even to the PhD level as long as that child has the aptitude and performs. And all the parent has to do is work and pay their 10% income tax and GCT. No student loans to kill people for years. No big NHT loans to kill people for years. The government will take care of the basic necessities, the whole housing, the nutrition, the health care, so that Jamaica will you know what we pledge there? Under God, increase in beauty, fellowship, and prosperity, and play her part in advancing the whole human race. But it cannot be done under the present system of governance. It can only be done under the UIC method of governance, where we take the extreme power that government has and gives it to the people. And then we take the education system and give it to the people and manage it on behalf of the people through international accepted standards. And we surpass those standards. And we have proven to you that we can afford it. Can we afford $3,000 a term, $5,000 a term, with the government paying the majority? We can. And for those who can't pay nothing. The government will pay and spend less money than than the government has been spending all these years. Government spending less money, that is taxpayers spending less money to achieve better quality. This is education under UIC. Can you see where this will benefit Jamaica? Then, if you do, we depend on your help to make it a reality. Now, I shall allow Mr. Christie his final words before I close off.
All right. So this gentleman asked, how long will it take to implement this system? We're looking at about the second or the third year of our first administration, because the first year will have to be used to clean up the messy government and clean up the entire system. And the whole system needs to purge. So, obviously the president will speak more on that. I'm just the numbers guy for the education committee. But we must know that this is just one piece of the UIC puzzle. The UIC has things we will present in health, things we will present in crime, in security, things we will present in development, in many areas. Just know that we at the UIC are working overtime, overtime. I'm a PhD student working, doing my dissertation. I'm still have to take up my time and do this because I am here to serve. I am here to serve the people. And I must say, it's hard sometimes. It's hard because the people don't know, like the people don't know what's good for them. They don't want to hear from the UIC for whatever reason. Can't really, I, I, I don't know, but I have to remind myself that I do this for the children of Jamaica. I do this for the youth of Jamaica. I have 10 nieces and nephews in Jamaica. 10 nieces and nephews, and I want to ensure that they have a good, solid education. And I really hope that people give us a chance to just serve them and present great ideas, revolutionary ideas to make Jamaica a better place. Thank you so much.
But the thing is, why people might not want it is because they are used to a certain way of doing things, and because we find comfort in the familiar. Sometimes we feel threatened by new and strange things, but it is something that we can all do together. You mentioned the USC having health plans and crime plans, but I want to point out to everyone how even this education plan will contribute to crime control and also to health. If a person understands their body, their minds, and so forth, they'll understand how to better take care of their bodies and their mental health and their emotional health. If a person understands um, that there is a principle of making money work for you instead of working for money, and exactly how to do that, and also to use their minds to solve problems on their own, then they're less liable to commit crime. And the UIC plan also looks at the youth employment solution. Youth leave from school either into a job or further studies or apprenticeship. So the education plan will work towards minimizing crime also and boosting our health. All right, so you have all heard, and thank you for watching. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. We need your help in making this a reality. Also, don't forget to donate as much as is possible. If you can donate 10 US or 1,000 Jamaican dollars or 25 US, we need to get the 1,000 monthly subscribers of 25 US monthly to effectively take the polls and make Jamaica better. Together we can do it. Also, if you haven't yet watched Why Are They Leaving and Why Them Eat Africa So, go and check them out. Leave a like and comment if you didn't, and share them also. Those two videos together with this creates that entire picture. All right, so together
And
we can do this.
my last remark, I'm very sorry. My last remark is, even if you can't donate, ensure all your friends and family and colleagues, your co-workers at work, make sure everybody knows about the UIC, because too many persons still don't know about the UIC. Too many persons have no idea what the UIC is. Too many persons. So ensure that all your family, friends have discussions, discuss ideas, discuss topics with them. Let us engage with people. Engage, please. Because too many persons don't know about us. We need to be out there. Thank you.
Yes, and we need to break the media blockade. So if the more people on board, is the more likely they will listen to us. All right. So again, if you cannot donate and you're not here to volunteer or don't have the time, then do what you can, like the live, share, comment, and subscribe. All right. So everyone, until next time. One Jamaica, stronger together. Change you can trust. Take care, everybody.